the competitive environment. The competitive structure of a market is quite important to how an organisation operates and the decisions that it needs to make. The competitive structure is defined as a number of organisations and the strength of these organisations and the level of competition within a market. So what you need to ask yourself is quite simply, how easy is it for new entrants to enter the market? That gives you an indication of how strong the level of competition is within a market. Clearly, from a consumer point of view, you want to have high levels of competition. From an organisation's point of view, you want to have low levels of competition because that can enable you to increase your profit margins. So why is competition important to a consumer? Well, the government and the EU looks at it from the point of view that the consumer likes competition because they get to have increased choice in the products they get offered. So by having increased choice, this creates more substitute products, and more substitute products is going to lead to hopefully more offers, which then of course will reduce prices and reduce profit margins. Of course, shareholders are not happy about this because this lowers the level of dividends and returns that they get. However, at the same time as doing this, when you've got more competition, it gives a greater drive for innovation and new products being developed, and of course pushing the limits and the boundaries of technology, which of course creates more wealth, more investment and more jobs in the long term. So governments again like this side because it creates growth in an economy. It also stops organisations from colluding, which obviously is like price fixing and talking to each other about limiting supply. There was accusations that this used to take place many years ago in different markets, like in technology for example, where two manufacturers of processing chips may take their time to release products, where when it was actually highly competitive, then they were releasing new products every single day, which of course forced the prices to drop and give the consumer more choice and obviously a better choice of product and technological advancement. And of course overall there could be the argument that it increases the level of employment that you have in an economy because you've got lots of different organisations taking on staff and fighting for those highly skilled employees that you have in your economy. Now what that leads us to is this element now. In a competitive environment we have three different types that we sort of judge it by. Now we have these things called monopolies, and that's when one organisation has 25% or more market share. So for example Tesco with their 33% share of the market, or EE for example, who have a large share of the mobile phone market. So if one organisation has more than 25% of the market, they are said to have a monopoly. Now an oligopoly is when you have a few businesses competing in a market. So you could argue the mobile phone market is an example of an oligopoly. The supermarket industry is an example of an oligopoly. Or the broadband market, where you've only got a few players again. So you can have a monopoly within an oligopoly, but this is where you've only got a few large players in a market. Typically in an oligopoly you'll actually find you've got more than one monopoly, so you'll have only maybe 2 or 3 players in that market. And then you've got what's the ideal option, which is called a monopolistic competition viewpoint. And in this view, it's a competitive market where many organisations are competing, there's few barriers to entry, there's high levels of competition, and consumers are getting a good deal out of this sort of marketplace, which is why every organisation and every company actually would try and drive towards a monopoly or an oligopoly where they can dictate the price. But governments of course try to ensure that monopolies and oligopolies aren't established, and try and keep this monopoly competition approach in their markets. This is where government intervention comes in and links with previous models that I've done for you. Okay, this ties into with Porter's 5 Forces. Now I've done a video resource about Porter's 5 Forces. It covers the concepts, so I recommend you check that out and watch that. However, what I will say about this model is that if you use Porter's 5 Forces, it's a great assessment tool for your exams, so you can look back at it, use this to make decisions about the market and how competitive the market actually is. But I'll leave you to watch that video resource separately. Just type in Porter's 5 Forces in my channel and you'll find it straight away, or look on the website, there'll be some links there. Okay, so let's use some of the tools we've got to try and assess the competitiveness of the market and show you how you can do this in the exam. So let's look at how competitive the UK mobile phone market actually is. Now obviously we know that the government allowed T-Mobile and Orange to merge together to form EE. Now they were allowed to merge together to create this monopoly. Now that's a rarity in the UK because we actually allowed a monopoly to be created. The argument for that was that it would create more investment in new technology like 4G and drive forward improvements in mobile phones, and ensure that the oligopolistic approach to the market would actually mean that other firms would respond to that need. Whether that'll be seen or not is a different issue, and it's also created, dare we say, a loose merger and a joint venture between O2 and Vodafone, who are now sharing their resources. We'll come to that in a minute. So actually you could argue it's had a negative effect on the market, but it's definitely an oligopoly. You've only got a few players. You've got a monopoly with 30% of the market. You've got low threat of new entrants just because of the high technological costs and the capital cost to get into that market. And any new entrants tend to be joint ventures, like Tesco Mobile partnered with O2, 50-50 split that is owned by. And now you've got Asda Mobile, who I think are partnering with EE. So you've got different, the main brands that are moving to the market are all joint ventures and merging together. So they're just using the power of their brand name and just trying to diversify from their core market using the skills of the mobile phone markets. So there's not many new players coming into the market, and there's lots and lots of barriers to entry stopping you getting in there. You've got reduced customer choice, so customers have got reduced choice. By merging to T-Mobile and the Orange into EE, you've taken away one player straight away, and that's limited it straight away. And also, I know that Vodafone and O2 are only having a joint venture on their site sharing, but it means that they're probably going to be closer linked in other aspects in the future maybe, and how they compete and what they offer, because they're going to have similar infrastructure behind the scenes. You've got reduced supplier power. Now that's the main benefit of the merger of T-Mobile and Orange into EE, because it meant that you could then dictate to the landlords on which site you want to locate your masts. So you've got two masts, you're going to choose one. You're going to have this synergy, bringing two into one, remember, saving money, the economy of scale idea. And of course that meant that they only have to pay one lot of rent, and they could find the best site and haggle. The O2 Vodafone Cornerstone agreement is exactly the same agreement, where they're going to share sites. So they're going to reduce the power of their suppliers and reduce their costs, and of course as they keep doing this, it makes it more difficult for the suppliers to actually dictate the price they're going to pay. 3 have a separate agreement with EE, or they had an agreement previously with O2 where they could share sites, so that is now part of a site sharing agreement as well. So notice that the power supply has really been reduced. And of course there's few substitutes. You actually can't choose many substitutes in the market. So again, they've reduced the limit of competition in the market and probably made the market not that competitive. It's only driven, the competition levels probably are from some of the new entrants like the Tesco's, the Sainsbury's, the Asda's, who are the what they call mobile virtual networks. So it's not that competitive as a market. Hopefully that makes sense how we assess that market. Now to try and limit this, the government and the European Union is trying to come up with some legislation to protect the consumer, and that's basic competition policy they come forward with. Now that is trying to prevent collusion, and they don't want to allow what's called cartels to happen. Now cartels are where firms work together to price fix or try and control the supply of goods. Remember, if you limit the supply, you're going to push up the price of a product. Now that is seen as bad because it's bad for the consumer. Now within that competition policy to try and prevent this, they've got legislation that tries to encourage free competition. They've also got legislation which enables them to restrict monopoly, so forcing to break them up if they have to. Or, now the example of that actually is Lafarge and Tarmac, where they've been told they have to break up their organisation into smaller areas because it's got a monopoly of the cement market. They can investigate them and prevent them from happening if there's going to be an acquisition happening. The one thing they can't do though is they can't really prevent organic growth, as Tesco have proven. If you just grow naturally, it's very difficult for this law to actually prevent that happening. And of course you can also prevent price fixing and investigate price fixing and elements of price fixing, which of course is bad for the consumer. Now Michael Porter, who you've seen already with his 5 forces analogy, he came up with this competitive strategies model as well, where he said that you've got a strategy where you could use one of 3 options. You've got cost leadership, differentiation, or focus strategy. And he said that if you go down the cost leadership strategy, you look to try and minimise your costs, control your costs at all levels, you try and improve your efficiency, get maximum capacity utilisation, and you try to use incentives and set high levels and targets to really achieve, they're going to challenge your organisation. But all this enables you to lower costs to the lowest possible level. You become seen as a cost leader, and people choose you, like EasyJet have done. EasyJet and the low budget airline, they've done exactly that strategy, being the low end. You could look at the mobile phone market and say that 3 have tried to do that strategy and that model. Well, you may have the differentiation approach. That's a total opposite approach. This is like the Bentley approach, where you try and specialise in technical expertise. You try and focus on the quality of the product. You focus on investing in innovation and research and development. You focus on training your staff to a higher level. and you will charge a high price. It gives you the ability to charge a high price, giving you high levels of added value. Or you could do the focus approach, which is a mix of both. The mix of both strategies, where you're going to try and do the cost leadership and the differentiation, and you're going to put them together and focus on a niche market within your market. Now, a good example of this is like the O2 gift gaff idea. Gift gaff is a brand of O2, but it was founded to try and focus on the low budget area of the market, but it's using O2's technological approach, it's using O2's expertise, it's using their innovation, but at the same time it's low budget, it's got high levels of target, it's got hardly any marketing taking place, it's all about reducing costs and focusing in that area. So that's a focus approach. Okay, that's it. You should now have an understanding of the competitive environment and the strategies that can be used by an organisation to make assessments about the levels of competition. Don't forget you can follow me on Twitter at BeeBusinessBee and subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can tweet me any areas of business you want me to cover in the future, and remember to check out my website beebusinessbee.co.uk.